Alright, Stevie Y, I was somewhat familiar with your game, but I think maybe not to this capacity. Because today we are revisiting some of the trade talk that the Detroit Red Wings had in their system and in their beat this past season, especially throughout the trade deadline period. You know, the Wings were always in there. They're trying to improve their team. We are hearing links to guys like Trevor Zegras and Erik Karlsson and a whole bunch of other random names that the Wings could go out there and potentially acquire. But in this video, we are talking about a guy whose name we had linked to Detroit multiple times throughout the course of the 24-25 season. Now, I say we have linked him to Detroit, but really, it's been a bunch of the other NHL insiders, and we just make videos about that stuff, and I give my opinions, and y'all give your opinions in the comments. It's kind of a interesting system that we have here on YouTube, but today we're diving into a former Buffalo Sabre turned Ottawa Senator in Dylan Cozens, because he is one of the names that we did make a ton of videos about in regards to the Red Wings and the potential interest that they had in this player. It was no secret that the Wings wanted this guy. And between all the videos we made of Elliotte Friedman talking about Cozens and Detroit heavily pursuing this guy, etc., we had a bunch of conversations about that. But ultimately, Cozens was not traded to Detroit. He was sent over to Ottawa for a package which included Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker, among other stuff. In today's edition of the 32 Thoughts podcast, though, we actually have ourselves some word from Elliotte Friedman as to what these trade ideas really looked like, and why the Red Wings did not end up acquiring Cozens. Take a look at this. Elliotte Friedman reports that the Sabres wanted Marco Kasper from Detroit in any Cozens trade. Now, this post is made on the R Sabres subreddit. Let's go out there and read the few comments on this post. It would have been a logical ask, Principles RK says. The original poster says it starts around 37:40 where Friedman talks about it. He then further discusses the Sabres at 1 hour and 10. I would have much preferred Kasper over Norris and would have added to Cozens for him. A reminder that trades don't happen in a vacuum. We could have wanted Kasper over Norris, but Detroit wanted more than we wanted to offer. Plenty of people thought we overpaid for Norris with Cozens, Gilbert, and a second, and you wanted to give up more? I'm happy with what we got for Cozens. Norris is better, Quick Boop says. He'll be insane next year. So, there are a number of fans that are disagreeing with this and that are agreeing with this, saying, hey, I would have overpaid more to get Marco Kasper over Josh Norris. And then there are others saying, hey, Norris is better than Kasper, so it's good that we got him instead of overpaying more for Kasper. If you go back to the trade, this is what it looks like here. The Ottawa Senators acquired Dylan Cozens, Denis Gilbert, as well as a second in exchange for Norris and Bernard-Docker. The implication here is that the Buffalo Sabres might have had to give up even more than just Cozens, Gilbert, and a second to get Kasper. Now, the Red Wings may not have been able to send over another defenseman like the Ottawa Senators did with Jacob Bernard-Docker, so maybe it does balance itself out, but ultimately, the Sabres were not able to get the guy that they wanted in a Detroit Red Wings trade for Dylan Cozens. They wanted Marco Kasper. Stevie Y would consistently say no. Either that, or Stevie Y would say, okay, we'll give you Kasper, but you gotta give us a lot more than just Dylan Cozens, and the Buffalo Sabres might not have been willing to do that. So with this in mind, it does open the question to Buffalo Sabres fans as to whom it is you would have rather wanted to see get traded to Buffalo. Josh Norris or Marco Kasper. Ultimately, if you're asking me, I think right now Josh Norris is probably the more valuable player just in terms of what they bring to the game at this very moment in time. Norris is significantly older than Marco Kasper. He's got 4 years on the young Austrian. But Marco Kasper, just wrapping up his first NHL season, getting 37 points in 77 games played, it's not bad. Not bad in the slightest. In fact, Josh Norris, if you take a look at his first NHL season, he had roughly the same amount of points, although he had quite fewer games played. Norris was then plagued by injuries over the next few years, which is why he slowed down and was only able to play 56 games in this NHL season. He hasn't been the healthiest pickle in the bunch, which definitely hurts his value. Now, stylistically, of course, these guys are very different. Marco Kasper is a guy who plays up and down. He plays with a high motor. He can do two-way stuff. He can also play on the wing and be a really nice fit with Raymond and Larkin. Meanwhile, Josh Norris, when he's playing his best, he is a goal-scoring, sniping center who had scored 35 goals in a season in only 66 games just a few years ago. That was before his really big injury bump in 2022, so Josh Norris has that goal-scoring touch to him. It's more of a matter of when, not if, Josh Norris hits 40 goals again in an NHL season. Now, you can also say, oh, because he's on Buffalo, maybe the chances of that are reduced because Buffalo's not as good as Ottawa, but still, Josh Norris as an individual talent is a goal-scoring machine. Marco Kasper, however, is 4 years younger and has a lot more of a motor, and I'd say he's more transcendental in all three zones versus Josh Norris. It's most likely why a bunch of these Sabres fans are saying, yeah, it would have been a good ask to get Marco Kasper in a Dylan Cozens trade, or it's not unreasonable of an ask for Buffalo to make in the event that they send over Cozens to Detroit. It was reported that Stevie Y and the Wings were really interested in Cozens. And I can understand from their point of view if they wanted to make a Cozens trade, but they absolutely under no circumstances did not want to include Kasper. If the Red Wings are able to keep Kasper, then all of a sudden that's that first-line winger with Raymond and Larkin. And your second-line center spot is filled with Dylan Cozens, and your third-line center spot, once Andrew Kopp comes back, he can be a more than serviceable third-line guy in that role. Expensive, yes, but still a useful hockey player to have versus a Joe Veleno, for example, who was then traded over to Chicago instead. The Red Wings probably wanted to keep that flexibility in their top six. If they were to get rid of Marco Kasper and get Cozens, honestly, you're not really getting much of an upgrade in terms of what your second-line center spot is able to provide. Kasper as a center was certainly a good hockey player, but he was way better as a winger on the first line there. So trading him and getting Cozens in exchange, you're only really slightly improving your center core down the middle with that move. Kasper is so young after all that it's really within Detroit's reason to say, yeah, we want to see what he can do longer term. We want to have this guy in our organization because he's only 21. We're not going to include him in a trade for a guy who's 3 years older, who also plays the same position, and whom we don't know how he'll play if he's with Larkin and Raymond on that first line. They want to keep both of them, Kasper and Cozens. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense to me why the Detroit Red Wings rejected this Dylan Cozens trade proposal where the Sabres wanted Marco Kasper in exchange, but the Wings were just not willing to give that up. He's too valuable, he's too versatile, and he's too good in order for them to realistically think about trading him away for just Dylan Cozens. There would have to have been more, and it's very clear that the Sabres would not have wanted to do that. They already gave up a bunch of stuff to send him over to Ottawa after all. Right? So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a Buffalo Sabres fan, how do you feel about the idea of your team targeting Marco Kasper, and what are your thoughts as to whether or not Kasper or Norris would have been a more beneficial add to your team in a Dylan Cozens trade? Red Wings fans, now that we know this, how do you feel about Stevie Y not acquiring Cozens? I know it wasn't really the most well-beloved idea in the first place, and I just know that because the comments in the videos were not really all too unanimous, but still, learning that this was the trade price, what are your thoughts on Stevie Y saying no? Let me know in the comment section all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.